Hello everyone. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our fourth and our final Money Monday webinar. My name is Jack from the Black Bullion team, and I'll be your host for the next half an hour. If you don't know, Money Mondays are a series of live webinars available through the Black Bullion platform, and it's a chance for you to take some time out of your week to think a little bit more about financial well-being, education, with the ultimate goal of becoming money smarter. So far this season, we've run sessions on budgeting, dealing with flatmates and finances, interest rates, and then, of course, today, buy now, pay later. And I hope that somewhere along the way, you've picked up some useful tips or advice that you can use for yourself. This week, I'm super excited to be joined by Alice Tapper. So Alice created Go Fund Yourself, which is a financial news and education platform that now has a community of over 100,000 people, which is truly amazing stuff. I think on Instagram, they're very close to hitting that 100K mark. So go and give them a follow over there. There are some really great pieces in there for young people, like information on mortgages, retirement when you eventually get there, and career advice. And what I like is oftentimes there's real examples from people that have written in that are included in the articles as well. Alice was also a key campaigner for better regulation of buy now, pay later products in the UK. Including calls for the ASA, which is the Advertising Standards Agency, to better regulate promotions, retailers to be more responsible with their promotions, and then finally the big one for the FCA to regulate buy now, pay later products like any other form of credit. So I am happy to say that there's now some draft legislation which will, fingers crossed, make its way into being law at some point. But of course, today the discussion is around buy now, pay later and how it all works. So if you have any questions, then please feel free to drop them into the chat and we'll address them sort of towards the end of the webinar. So Alice, thanks for coming along. How are you doing?
Very good. Hey, Jack. Very happy to be here, and thanks for the great intro.
No problem. I realize that my little Halloween overlay that I've got on means that you do have a little spot.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, you can sort of like
you can my flat.
Yeah, you can point at the spider and maybe we can give him a nickname as we go along.
Is he that way? Am I looking at him? Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Yeah, you're looking the right way. He's over there. So I think he's called Spidey. I think the design team have called him Spidey actually.
I like it. So nice work, design team.
Right. Well, in order to I don't want to sort of like hang around too much or anything with my waffle. So I'll kick off. And sort of the first question that I have for you today is essentially, what is buy now, pay later?
So buy now, pay later is a form of credit. And credit basically means it's a form of financing where you get money up front. A lender sort of lends you money up front to buy something, and then you have to pay it back. With buy now, pay later, there are sort of two really important sort of parts to it. Number one is that it's at the point of purchase. So when you're on ASOS, as many people listening will know, it pops up at the end and gives you the option to use buy now, pay later. So it's at the point of purchase, and it's a deferred form of payment, which means that either it's something like you pay back in, say, 30 days, or that payment is then split up into, say, 3 or 4 kind of chunks over the next few weeks or months. As you pointed out, buy now, pay later is sort of unique in that it falls into a bit of a regulatory loophole, and it is not regulated. Most of them are not regulated, and that's because they do not charge interest typically, although I'm sure we'll get into it. There are sort of some grey areas there with different buy now, pay later providers charging interest on some products. But generally speaking, what we're talking about today is non-interest charging at the point of purchase, splitting up payments of a thing, a top, for example.
Yeah, sure. And you obviously, I mentioned it in the intro and you just touched on it briefly there, but where are we currently with sort of like the regulation of buy now, pay later?
Yeah, so I launched the Regulate Buy Now Pay Later campaign at the beginning of the pandemic, actually. Bit of a lockdown activity. Some people took up baking. I almost got sued by Klarna. So I launched the campaign. At the time, I'll be honest with you, it was a very different sort of landscape at the time, because they were relatively new on the scene. there was no regulation, and there was a lot of pretty dodgy marketing practices. There were things like, why wait till payday, no money, no problems, those kind of things. Similar stuff that we saw with you see with like loan sharks and kind of really dodgy financial practices. Quite honestly, things have got a lot better. I launched this campaign. Lots changed around advertising. As you said, the Advertising Standards Authority kind of came in and started being a bit more serious about it all. As you said, there is some kind of draft legislation. There was a big review called the Woolard Review by the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, which is the regulator, that said it all needs to be regulated. However, the big however is that there has been some extremely powerful lobbying by the buy now, pay later companies. They are some of them best mates with Rishi, and have been invited into number 10 and done sort of work very hard to make sure that the regulation doesn't get through. So at the moment, it's very likely that it will kind of be canned, or at least kind of put on hold or watered down, which I think we were all very in favor of. Proportionate regulation. It doesn't need to get rid of buy now, pay later entirely, but it is definitely the case that some kind of rules and regulations need to come in order to protect consumers. So at the moment, sorry, long-winded answer, we don't really know. It's all a bit up in the air, basically, and we may not know until the next Prime Minister.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think it was a good answer, to be honest, and I think it's not a question that has a simple answer. Like, there's lots of nuance and lots of context behind it. So thank you for that. Just sorry to be flip-flopping around, but just to sort of like go back to actual buy now, pay later products themselves. Do you think you could talk around maybe some of the potential like benefits or drawbacks of buy now, pay later? So how could they be used in a sort of healthy and sustainable way? And like, what are some of the sort of negative aspects of these products?
Yeah, sure. So worth me saying, I've used buy now, pay later. It can be a really useful tool. It's not all bad, just like, not all debt is bad. It's how you use it and what you spend it on, basically, or what you use it for.
Yeah.
I would say one of the big kind of pluses is that it is typically, there's no interest. And many individuals, particularly young people, struggle often to access affordable credit. So it can be a great way of being able to finance essential items, particularly big ticket items that otherwise you'd have to save up a long time for, or get into kind of take out some form of high cost credit. So it's great for avoiding those situations. The drawbacks, I would say, are that it's not kind of completely risk-free. There are late payment fees. It can impact your credit score, which I know we'll kind of get onto later on. And also, it is a form of debt. It's an obligation. It's not free money. It's something that you do have to eventually pay back. And getting into unmanageable debt comes with lots of big risks that you need to be mindful of when using these products, because if something impacts your credit score, that can then impact your ability to take out more important forms of credit, like a mortgage down the line. So I'd say those are the kind of big pros and cons.
Yeah, I was going to sort of echo that as well, where the pros are often almost similar to the cons, in that like it can help you sort of start to build that credit history, especially if you're a young person and you don't have much credit history. But then also it can work the other way as well. Like, it can have a negative impact if it's used in an unsustainable way. My next two are, maybe the questions can be blended together a little bit, but I wanted to ask you about sort of, are all of the buy now, pay later offerings the same? Are there any sort of like differences between them, and how would you as a consumer be able to sort of differentiate between like one from another? Like, what are some of the key things to be looking out for?
Yeah, so they probably actually used to be more different than they are now. So Klarna, for example, always used to say they didn't have any late payment fees and they didn't report to credit reference agencies. When you hear that, think credit score, because that's how your credit score is impacted. Whereas now it can impact your credit score, and they do charge late fees. And many of the others are kind of pretty similar. What will differ is the size of those late fees, so how much the late fees sort of actually are, and also the kind of design of the product. So some might be pay in 30 days, some might be pay over, split into 3, or the slice it kind of offering. Others might be, 6 installments. It really depends on the kind of, it depends on the provider, and it's worth just really being clear when you're signing up, like what the product actually is and what your obligations are. It's also just worth me saying at this point that buy now, pay later, and when we used to talk about Klarna or ClearPay, you would think, oh, it's buy now, pay later. These companies have now had to really differentiate and go into lots of different kind of products. They're not just offering this kind of form of financing anymore. Many of them have apps. They offer like a discount code plugin on your browser. They have true kind of financing where there is interest on kind of larger purchases. So it's just important to be aware that when you see brand names like ClearPay, Laybuy, Klarna, whatever, that they're not necessarily all the same product, and it's not necessarily what we typically think about. They offer lots of different things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That completely makes sense. And I think you mentioned just quickly there about sort of like credit reference agencies, but how does buy now pay later affect credit rating? And this is one that was particularly sort of interesting for me recently. So I've never had a credit card myself, and I thought I'd like to start sort of building up a bit of lending history. So when I eventually come to apply for a mortgage or something like that, then there's a bit of history there. And me specifically, I was looking at like Monzo's the Monzo Flex product that they have, and I was trying to work out, like, I was like, is this actually like a what I understand to be a credit card, or like how do they report on sort of like credit? And I was kind of finding it difficult to fully understand. So like, do you have any tips there, Alice, on or like things to look out for to know whether or not it's going to be having a, whether it be positive or negative impact on a credit rating?
Yeah, and you make a really good point, by the way, which I should just add on, which is not only are all of these companies very different now, there are lots of new companies, including your bank, like Monzo,
Yes.
offering things like Flex, which is buy now, pay later. So that's just
Yeah.
an important addition. So on your credit rating, there are sort of 2 ways in which your credit score, to put it simply, there are 2 ways in which your credit score could be impacted when using a form of credit. Typically, that's either on application, because that credit provider will do something called a search. Now, with buy now, pay later, that search is called a soft search, which means it doesn't show up on your credit file. So when you're applying for buy now, pay later at the checkout, that is not going to impact your credit score. Where it does impact your credit score is your payment history. So whether you actually keep up with payments, and the kind of most extreme case of that is if you never pay them back. That could then leave something called a default on your credit history, on your credit file, which you really don't want, and that's kind of a bit of a black mark. Now, like these days, I would say most of them, well, ignore the bit about the hard search. None of them do that. That's fine. So you're fine actually applying for it. But the bit that you want to be careful of are the payments. It wasn't typically the case that missing a payment would impact your credit score, but it now does. So you need to be sort of very careful at staying on top of your payments, making sure you're making them on time. If you're using multiple buy now, pay later providers, really putting them in your calendar, making sure you've got reminders on your phone as to when those payments are actually coming out, so that you're not missing them, and not doing the thing that I think we're all a little bit guilty of doing, which is kind of, oh, they won't find me, just head in sand, ignore the brown envelope that sort of that are piling up inside your door. Don't do that. Confront it head
Absolutely
on.
not.
The good thing is that generally speaking, because they're no interest, the reality is if you're late on missing a payment, yes, okay, it might end up on your credit file. You're not going to get this huge interest accumulation that you would do if you were late on like paying a loan, or even worse, a payday loan. So it's not going to be horrendous, and hence you should stay on top of it. It's not there's nothing terrifying in that brown envelope, but you do want to make sure that you do make them on time, basically.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's one of the things that sort of stands out to me whenever I think about sort of like buy now, pay later products. I always think, it only takes like a handful of sort of spread payments for it to then become like very difficult for a consumer
Yeah,
to visualize, like, right, I have this going out then, and then you have like a constant sort of drip of just money sort
yeah,
of like going out of your account. And it can be hard to understand, like, am I in surplus or am I in sort of deficit?
yeah. And
So
it's really
yeah.
difficult because it's the as I said, one of the pros is that it's great for managing your cash flow. If you've
Yeah.
got one provider that you're using, and it's, that on the day after payday or whenever, whenever your money comes in, that you're going to have to make that payment. But if you've got 6 different payments throughout the month, that is not a good way of managing your cash flow. So as you were saying, it's like some of the pros can also be the cons if you're not using it kind of well and responsibly.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So picture this, Alice, right? I'm on ASOS. I'm looking at a nice pair of Adidas trainers that I fancy buying. I'm at the
Yeah.
checkout and I'm looking and I'm being presented with an option to check out using buy now, pay later. What are some questions that I should be asking myself before picking that as a payment method?
So I guess if we're being I'll start with the sort of ideal question, which I appreciate we're all guilty of not necessarily asking ourselves this, which is that, do you actually need this kind of thing? Like, is it really
Mhm.
kind of essential? And are you getting the true value out of using buy now, pay later? I use that example of, say, buying like a bed or a piece of furniture or something that you actually need right now. And if you don't have it now, either you're going to be sleeping on the floor or you're going to have to, I don't know, take out a form of higher cost credit in order to pay for that thing. So that is a really great justification. And you can clearly answer at checkout, yeah, I do need this. And this is a really good use of this financial product. The
Yeah.
reality is, fast fashion is one of the kind of biggest use cases of buy now, pay later. So I don't expect, everyone to sort of be using it perfectly. And of course, we're all, yeah, and particularly as students, like I get that. But I think it's then about thinking, okay, if you really do want a new top, whatever, for the weekend, then just thinking really carefully about when those payments are actually going to be coming out and being mindful of whether that is a payment that you are actually going to be able to afford. And maybe it's about, not going for the £50 top and going for a £25 one instead, because that that realistically that is a payment that you're going to be able to make and you're not going to struggle. I think there's this something that I have done, and I know that we're all kind of guilty of doing it, is we sort of say to ourselves, oh, that's like, so in my case, that's next month Alice's problem, like you're kind of,
Yeah, yeah,
oh,
yeah,
like that's their problem. And there's that little like niggling, that you're being a bit like you're not making the best financial choice,
yeah,
right? And I think
yeah,
we all know when we're doing that. And I think listening to that little voice, and kind of making the slightly more sensible choice, even if it's a little bit, oh, I didn't really need the top. I think that's probably a good step in the
yeah.
right
I
direction.
think, yeah, when it comes to just anything and budgeting in general, I think always just taking a beat and just sort of pausing and thinking like, oh, do I actually need this? Or, taking some actual, even physical time away and then coming back and being like
Yeah.
24 hours later, like, do I still feel the same way?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
the
is
48-hour
good
rule
advice.
is a good one. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Giving it some time, looking through, your alternatives. Is it, and also another one is like, are you doing this for the dopamine hit because you want that new thing? Because shopping is very addictive, particularly when it feels free, which we know that buy now, pay later does give you that feeling. Or is it that you really love this thing and you know that it's going to kind of spark joy, as Marie Kondo would say. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think you're right. Taking a moment is a really great step.
Yeah, sure. I do have a couple of sort of, you know, not basic, but I do have some sort of fundamental questions about sort of buy now, pay later that I'm hoping you can help answer. Like, obviously this will be general because there's lots of different providers, but what happens when I return goods that I've bought using buy now, pay later?
So in theory, the retailer and the buy now pay later provider communicate. So it's not really your responsibility to let the buy now pay later provider know that you have returned that item. They should communicate to one another. And if you're using the buy now pay later company insert name app, then it should update. However, I do know stories of people where the return hasn't kind of logged for whatever reason, and then you need to get in touch with customer service. And I think that's just a good reminder to check your refunds, because I mean, I've had it before where you realize that actually something that was supposed to be refunded sort of 2 months ago, it never did, and then you're in this whole admin hellhole trying to sort the solution out. So yeah, I would definitely just keep an eye on your returns and make sure that you're not kind of still indebted after making them.
Great stuff. Can I make early payments if I want to?
Yeah, you should be able to make early payments, and you should not be charged any kind of early repayment fees. So yeah, if you want to make early repayments, then you should be able to do that.
Amazing. And then this is a sort of quite an interesting one. Obviously, you mentioned it earlier. If I'm using like multiple providers, like what would you say the best way to stay on top of the repayments is? Are there any sort of like apps that I can take advantage of, or is it more of a case of just the old fashioned, like, write it down or create a spreadsheet, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, analog, like old fashioned route would be just reminders in your phone. And I think that's probably just not a bad shout anyway. Most of them are pretty good at sending you an email about like when it's due, and then it's just really easy to like click on it and save it to your calendar. So I would personally use that as the kind of most reliable method. If you're using what's called an open banking app, which is an app that allows you to kind of plug in all of your different financial accounts, some of them do integrate with buy now pay later providers. That being said, I don't know if all of them are integrated, if that makes sense. So I know that some of them are integrated with Klarna, for example. So therefore you can get kind of all your Klarna payments and reminders about when things are due. That said, I just don't know if they're integrated. I don't know if you'll find an app that is integrated with all of the different buy now pay later providers, if that makes sense. So Snoop is an app that I use and really like, and I know that is kind of enables you to track payments and things like that. Emma, I don't know if they're integrated into all different buy now pay later providers, but those are just 2 free apps off the top of my head that are really good for kind of tracking payments, subscriptions, things like that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for all of that. Like, I think, it's always good to get like a refresher on sort of some of the basics and some of the fundamentals as well, because sometimes I think, and even when you're just talking with your friends, sometimes you don't realize that sometimes people might struggle understanding some of the fundamentals, and like you go off on tangents and not realize that other people might not be as educated or as clued up on the subject. So I think it's really good always to go back to basics and sort of bash out some of the more simple questions.
Also, these are really new financial products. Like, they're not, and I know everyone goes back to the thing of, oh, we should have been taught about money in school. I mean, they didn't have buy now pay later then, so I think you're not stupid for not understanding these things. I've had to learn it by just researching and figuring out kind of, and they're changing all the time. Things are kind of moving constantly. So and particularly which I know we've sort of talked about before, in the wide, anyone that's studying kind of economics and business will know that things are really difficult at the moment for financial service providers, and with interest rates going up, so these companies are challenged economically at the moment, and so they'll be thinking about lots of different creative ways to make money. So I'd say watch this space for ways in which this kind of model will change and different products will pop up, and we'll be having a very different conversation next year, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think for the buy now pay later discussion, I think that's a really good point to sort of leave off on. I do have a cheeky quickfire round Alice,
Go
that
for it.
now is sort of like more broad. If I can find my doc with my questions in it. So I think the first one that I have for you. So just some rules. One sentence answer only, please. I will allow
Okay.
some commas and things, but one sentence only,
Okay.
please. We've had trouble with Vivi, the founder and CEO of Black Bullion, taking some liberties with the one sentence rule.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I will
Strict
be
rules.
I will be holding you to it.
Yeah.
So first question: favorite money saving tip?
Paying yourself first. I don't know whether I should expand on that, but that would be more than one sentence. So
I will allow you to
look it
expand on
up.
that because I think it's a good. Yeah. Google it.
Paying yourself, saving automatically after payday.
Yes. Okay. Great answer. Number 2, favorite finance app on your phone right now?
2 that I mentioned, Snoop and Emma. Not sponsored in any way.
Not sponsored. Not sponsored. But if they would like to sponsor, then
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
open.
Best personal finance book everyone should read?
I have one called Go Fund Yourself. If not, then I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi.
Nice. I promise that wasn't just an excuse to get you to
Yeah.
promote the book that you've written. But yeah, good advice as well. Good advice. I like that. Oh, this one's quite hard to answer in just a sentence, but what's the best resource or technique to help better understand financial jargon?
Resource, Go Fund Yourself on Instagram. Technique, setting up a financial routine, a to-do list of financial tasks every month.
Sure. Yeah. Okie dokes. And then the final one that I have for you, what is a piece of financial advice that you would give to your younger self?
Oh, that's a really good one. No question is, which I pointed to before, no question is a stupid question.
I like that. I like that one. Yeah. I think, yeah. That's a really
Particularly
nice one,
when,
actually.
sorry, I know it's cheeky.
Go on. No, you're allowed it.
Particularly when accessing financial services, ask questions. The financial services industry has made money for years off making things more complicated than they should be. So don't be afraid to ask the obvious question, because it's probably the question they don't want you to ask.
Very nice. Yeah, very nice. A really good answer. I really enjoyed that. Unfortunately, I'm looking at my little timer clock now. It's telling me we're going over a little bit on time. But thank you, Alice. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks for
I've
having me.
really
It's been
enjoyed.
great.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the chat. Where can people read more of your stuff or find out more about what you're doing?
Go Fund Yourself on Instagram. I think it's under my, where am I? Here, under there. On Instagram, and also through the link tree there, you can sign up for the mailing list where you'll get a weekly digest of all the latest and greatest pieces of financial news.
Very nice. Yeah, I would recommend as well. Big fan of the Go Fund Yourself content that you put out as well. I think it's very. I like that it's just normal and real people that message in and sort of
there's some juicy stories as well. Some good
all the juicy goss,
Yeah.
If anyone would like to learn a little bit more about Black Bullion or download the app, then they can do using the QR code there. It will take you to the app landing page. I'd very much appreciate it if you download, have a play, let us know what you think. And that brings us to the end of our Money Monday series. So I hope that everyone has found it useful, and I hope that you have gained a little bit of information that you can take and use to become money smarter. Hopefully we'll be back in some shape or form. I don't know if it'll be a live webinar or it might be a pre-recorded or podcast or something, but very much enjoyed doing these webinars. So thank you to everyone that has come along. And I will see you next time. So thank you very much and goodbye.